There are some stupid criminals, and then there are even stupider criminals. In the case of 34-year-old Gerald B. Hardin and his accomplice, we're inclined to say they both went above and beyond the latter. Gerald Hardin's name will likely remain in infamy. What exactly did he do? How did an insurance scam lead him to such a drastic consequence? What are the details of this case, and how much impact did it have on the people involved? Let's find out. An insurance scheme gone awry has left two South Carolinians with blood on their hands after allegedly conducting an amputation on a third party with a rudimentary yard tool. According to the federal indictment, Gerald B. Hardin, 34, and another unnamed male severed an acquaintance's hand with a pole saw, a compact chainsaw attached to a pole used to cut tree branches, in an attempt to collect benefits on 3 accidental death and dismemberment policies, as well as the homeowner's insurance policy at the Sumter County home where the incident occurred. The name of the homeowner has not yet been released. What is known, however, is that the man who suffered the hackneyed amputation was later transported to a local hospital where surgeons attempted unsuccessfully to reattach his hand. So how much does a hand fetch these days anyway? According to authorities, the 3 received a little more than $671,000 from the combined policies in this not-so-garden-variety accident. It remains unlikely that any of them will get to enjoy their respective cut of the ill-gotten gains. Some time passed after the perpetration of the crime before the FBI received a tip about the alleged insurance fraud scheme. Federal prosecutors report that Hardin and his accomplice sawed off the hand of the third party back in May 2008. Following an investigation by the FBI, Hardin opted to turn himself in, later posting a $100,000 bond for release from a county detention center. He is charged with 6 crimes, including insurance fraud, for which he could spend 20 years in jail and pay as much as $250,000 in fines if found guilty. In addition, pending a conviction, the court could ask that Hardin pay restitution in the amount of the insurance payouts. Like Gerald Hardin, there was another man who thought he could get away with his crime. Stephen Craig murdered his ex-partner, who died 21 years after he doused her with petrol and set her on fire. Mother of 2, Jacqueline Kirk, suffered unimaginable physical injuries that required hours of surgery on a tracheotomy, facial reconstruction, and skin grafting after 35% of her body was burnt. Kirk had struggled to regain a normal life following the fire that had left her on the brink of death. She could no longer paint, a hobby she loved, because of her injuries, and people would cross the road when they passed by and shout "freak" at her. Despite her injuries, Kirk managed to rebuild her life. She beat the odds of her survival chances, lived to see her grandchildren, and took up photography to fill her love of art. The man responsible, Stephen Craig, was inspired by the 1992 Quentin Tarantino film Reservoir Dogs, when he attacked Weston Supermare nearly a quarter of a century ago. In the movie, the villain tortures a policeman in a warehouse, pouring petrol all over him and threatening to set him alight. Unlike the fictional character, though, Craig followed through on the horrific threat. It all started in 1995. Kirk began a relationship with Craig. Her 2 children, Sana was 13 and Shane was 22 at the time. Shane said he didn't know Craig much as their mother tried to hide the details of their relationship, but he said he saw her change, and by the following year, understood the terrible things happening in their relationship. He said on one occasion, Craig went into her bedroom with a can of petrol and poured it all over Kirk and her bed and threatened to set it alight, telling her, "I could end you right now." Then Craig forced Kirk to go on a trip after threatening to kill her in April 1998. While at a service stop, Craig filled a bottle of Coca-Cola with petrol, and while parked in a Weston Supermare car park, launched the attack that would change her life forever. She felt petrol being poured over her head and chest as he forced her head down in the passenger seat. They got out of the car and he offered her a cigarette, saying, "It may be your last." He had a lighter in his hand, and a flame went across her face as she was ignited as she screamed for help in agony. He did not try and help her, but told her to stay away from him and roll over to put the flames out. Kirk's wounds were life-changingly awful, and pictures of them were too graphic to show to the jury. She suffered intestinal swelling for an unknown reason, and scarring to her chest and abdomen meant that her ability to expand was reduced. This caused a ruptured diaphragm, with doctors unable to operate given her frailty. Her son and daughter were by her bedside when she died in August 2019. When the police got involved, Craig lied to them about the injury and charges were not successfully brought against him. Maybe she was still afraid of him, but a year later, Kirk reported him after she found out he attacked and raped another woman. In 2000, Craig was convicted of grievous bodily harm with intent following a trial in Bristol Crown Court. He served more than 15 years in prison for that attack and 2 offenses against a different woman, but was recalled on 2 separate occasions. Kirk was 40 years old when she was set on fire and was given around 10 more years to live due to the severity of her injuries. She spent her remaining 21 years adapting to her new life and finding normality amid her injuries. She would become a nanny after her 2 children had children of their own. Craig was arrested for his crime once again, this time for murder. Capturing the moment of his arrest, the police officer is heard saying, "Jacqueline Kirk, you were convicted for GBH. She died in 2019. She has died as a result of the injury she sustained from the assault you committed on her. So that is why you are being arrested for suspicion of her murder." While hearing the conditions of his arrest, Craig continued to roll a cigarette as he sat on the floor. On October 28, a jury agreed with the prosecution that the horrific injuries he inflicted led to Kirk's death and convicted him of murder. The charge was only possible after a rule called the Year and a Day Rule was abolished in 1996, which allowed to prosecute a homicide offense in which a death occurred over a year and a day after the unlawful act. Craig's defense told the trial that it was wrong to assert that the scarring explained the rupture. He said the decision not to operate appeared to be based on Kirk's frailty and other illnesses rather than the injuries sustained in 1998. Craig accepted that he had committed the attack on Kirk, meaning the murder trial was limited to medical evidence. And that was there. Kirk was surely a remarkable and impressive woman. She was only expected to live for 10 years due to her injuries, but against the odds survived for more than twice that. With the help of her family, she was determined to lead as full a life as she could. But due to the extent of her injuries, it was a demi-life.